Past 11.
Yeah.
I'll let
Is it 11 o'clock cutoff for pasta, 12 o'clock cutoff for drinks?
Something like that.
no, there's no cutoff for drinks.
But we're too alcoholic.
I think we got everybody.
Yep. Okay, cool. So I guess this is the UI meeting for December 1st, 2013. And I guess do you want to start on the follow-on work real quick?
Yeah, the error handling. Yeah.
Yep. Nope. Go ahead.
I was going to say the error handling. I think there's a spike and a tech debt set up for this, so this can be moved to done, at least for now.
Okay. I guess I guess our only thing about 1.5 is we do have our first components in there.
I'm sorry, Kai, your room is echoing. I don't know if you guys can be on with the. Thank you. Sorry. Continue.
There we go. Okay, yeah. So I don't know. Does anybody have anything else to add on 1.5 in terms of using it over the last month? I guess.
The only thing that I've run across is for at least for 1.6, it's looking like the use of $on_init, the lifecycle hook, and a controller is becoming more and more important. And so they're even saying at the point where any initialization of variables or declarations of variables on this context should actually be done in the on_init, which I found to be a little bit interesting. I'm not entirely sure the reasoning there, but it does sound like there is a push. I'm wondering if the controllers are going to stop being constructor functions in future iterations, and the on_init is going to be initializing the controller kind of instance, so to speak. So just a heads up on that. Any work in flight right now doesn't need to go that route, but as we do see the use of $on_init, if we're defining things like this on state, so this state and stuff like that, those should all be actually declared and defined within the on_init function. I don't know if anybody has any thoughts on that, but I don't know. Just curious why. Yeah, I'm kind of curious why too, but the more people that I see writing about Angular 1.5 and the upgrade path to Angular 2, they're saying, $on_init more and more and more. I assume, yeah, somewhere down the way, they're going to pull the rug out from under us and stop making controller providers actual instantiators and just providing objects that provide a service API. So $on_init will become kind of an invoking function to define everything that's going to be on that object. I assume that's the reasoning behind it, but I haven't found much concrete information there. Run across anything more on that, bring it up.
Well, you remind me of a few other things that I've been reading. I know we just got to 1.5, but you just brought up 1.6. $HTTP success and error, they're officially gone in 1.6. So over the next few releases, we are definitely going to have to review our resources that use success and error and get them to use actual promise resolution.
Yeah, JT, can you try to find there's a tech debt out there for updating the OFM services, OFM resources. can you make a note of that and the fact that it's going to be a hard break at 1.6?
Okay. The other thing I've been seeing about 1.5 is the stopping of needing, or excuse me, how do I say this? There should be less and less need for using scope.watch at all. You should be using on change. That way, any sort of thing that you would normally be watching, you would do your stuff on changes. So there's one in and one out on changes. That's what everybody's recommending. Like, you should start seeing scope watch less and less.
But that only, my understanding is that only works on components and directives that have bindings, right?
Yeah. Well, I don't know exactly what the full cycle is, how it goes, and what it runs through on changes. But that's something that if you're ever looking into it, that'd be something that we should all probably try to get a grasp on. Just what I'm seeing as a trend.
Yeah, I mean, the life cycle hooks, I think the idea is that they just, you know, we have on init, we have on changes, we have on destroy, and having kind of all of the code and or logic within the controller kind of contains those hooks is definitely a trend that we're seeing more and more.
So those are my two things.
Anything else? Or should we move on?
Yeah, I think Chris had a good point just now. He was asking if we should document this stuff. I think we're probably at a point where we need to start capturing some of these trends and best practices in like an Angular 1.5 plus documentation on the best practices page. On that?
I'll own it.
Chris will own it.
Cheers.
I volunteered. I'll take care of it. We should make sure that we're clear about that, and that way we have something to reference. That way, make sure we can in future PRs.
All right. So this one I'm just going to keep on there. First one on the list. You wanted to, ooh. All right, Justin, you wanna discuss this one?
No, it's Adrian's ticket. I just was replying to him.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, it's me.
Okay.
So this was a while ago. A lot of time has passed, and I work with this functional programming and the Lodash utilities. So I started to recognize the patterns. The issue I had at the beginning is that while I was on pull requests, I had a hard time understanding the intent in there. But right now is a lot clearer after I used it for a while. I still find debugging difficult, but it looks like that's going to be solved in a future version of Chrome. They're introducing something like inline breakpoints. You can actually add them to promises, to then and finally, and all those stuff. So that's going to be solved in the future. The other thing was the coverage, test coverage. It's actually not reporting accurately when you're using Lodash. So you might miss things. For example, if you pick up someone else's code and some part of it doesn't have coverage, you may not notice that. But other than that, I've been using it a lot lately, and I like it, and I think everybody uses it these days, so might as well make it official. So we don't get the same on and on comments in pull requests when we're not using them.
Yeah, I think the takeaway here might be to capture those areas where folks recommend basically a functional recipe for something that is currently non-functional. And to kind of capture that in a list somewhere, probably under the JavaScript best practices as like just Lodash recipes to consider. We could probably start out with some ones to kind of just get it started, and then as we run across more and more in pull requests, anytime any of us run across one in a pull request, just kind of add it to the list, so we have some sort of sense of how we're using it and how we can be using it to save code and time and clarify things. Anybody want to own that? Kind of just get it started and at least have a placeholder for where to add additional recipes.
I guess I'm not quite clear. We're doing recipes.
Well, yeah. So I mean, it's the idea of like if you see a function that takes a response object and that function is responsible for assigning response.data to the variable or whatnot, right? I mean, like immediately, like that kind of comes up as well. It's kind of doing two things. We're reaching into the response object that's coming function, and then we're doing assignment. That can be rewritten using flow with property and set. So having that kind of example, because I mean the documentation is all well and good on Lodash, right? I mean like the individual functions, but to actually see the recipes in action, to kind of share different things and the reasons that they come up, I think could be useful, especially when bringing in new hires, because it kind of captures like this is how we're using Lodash. And then also just to make sure that we're all on the same page and we have a reference. So when we find ourselves writing something, we're like, oh yeah, we saw that. There was a Lodash way of doing this. I can't think of it right now. Go back and reference the list. Say, oh yeah, that's the recipe we want to use there.
Okay, I'll start the page. I have nothing on my plate. And I'll throw a few recipes on that.
I think that'd be a big win for us. It would be a lot easier to, I've had that happen where cases I'm like, how can I do this more functional? And
Right.
Then I have to go back and look for the code and finding it. So I
And
think
even
it's
if the recipes aren't exact, they'll maybe get you part of the way, and then the other kind of gets you started. Once you get started, you kind of whatever you're left with is kind of like, oh, that's just this, and then you keep kind of adding to it. And the nice thing about flow is it's just string functions.
Off of that, I just want to say too, that one thing I have been noticing now that we've been becoming more functional is sometimes we miss the JS doc. Sometimes I just want to advocate to just make sure that when we're in PRs, that if we're doing nice, beautiful functions that are that we're actually actually documenting the arguments that it's going to at least accept and return.
It's almost more important now because a lot of times we're writing functions that return functions. And so knowing what the variable parameter list is that this new function takes after deriving from these three other functions is extremely important.
Just to be clear, we're not saying give them names. We're just documenting the type signature, right?
Right. I mean, we need to be documenting the signature. In some ways, I mean, like.
I disagree with names. That's why.
Again.
I disagree with giving names to parameters. That one of the big tenets of functional programming is point free, meaning you don't have to name variables.
Right, and they're not even variables, but the problem is now I think JS Hint requires our parameters to have names.
Yeah, but JS Hint doesn't complain if you just give it a type.
Yeah, but JS Hint will still complain about that. So we're going to have linting errors if you say @param.
I don't think that happens right now.
Yeah, it definitely complains. Yeah, it does. Right. If you say @param object and leave the name off, it'll say expecting parameter to be named.
Oh, you're talking about like a base function, not something that's been flow or composed.
No, I mean, if you, even if you flow two functions together and the result of that flow is a function, you still need, if you're documenting the parameters for that resulting function, JS hint at least requires them to be named. They can be named much more generically though, which is nice. I mean, if you find yourself struggling to come up with a name, if you call it just @param and it's going to be an object, you can just name the damn parameter object. It's kind of silly and redundant. There are some cases where it can be more meaningful if you're, for example, using like partial set and you're saying, I want to set this variable to this value. I mean, the name of the variable is essentially the name of what you're setting. So it's kind of like the new value coming in. If they don't really line up, that could look a little weird.
Yeah, I would like to revisit that in the future then, just because naming things is hard.
Yep, agreed.
And the less naming of things I feel better about, because that way we don't have to argue about it. It's a waste of time.
Is there, I wonder if JS hint has a way to just, we can ignore that. And I also wonder, I mean, the hard part about that then is that if you have, 5 arguments or whatnot, and you only list 3 in your JS doc. Right now, if they're named and they're the first 3 arguments of the function, we don't have any linting problems, but there's some challenges there in terms of linting. And
Yeah, we don't have to resolve it here. Maybe that's something that I'll pay more attention to going forward, because I really didn't think lint complained, but you guys are saying it does, so okay.
it's @param. @type doesn't need a name, absolutely. But @param right now, our linters require naming, and I think it may be through JSCS, thinking about it right now. But and it may also be something that maybe the JS and JSCS combination doesn't really get us, but maybe ES lint, it may be another reason for prioritizing that. I think right now that tech that is prioritized in PC15, but we're trying to shave down PC15, and that is one that's probably getting funds.
Okay.
This argument, if we want to continue to move down this path, this argument is certainly in favor of moving that priority up the list.
Yeah. All right. So I'll write the recipes then, or I'll start it anyway. Then I'll turn it around.
I had another question related to. Yes, okay. So it seems like when we're creating these functions that use Lodash, for example, flow, partial, or they're all like utilities functions we use in our actual code, and they seem to add a lot to the file. So, but they're related to the state, to the controller state, for example. So they need to be in that file. So I was wondering if it would make sense to create a service where you pass it the state object and it just generates the function for you, but it stays separate from the controller, and maybe it can be reused in multiple controllers. That way we can separate these utilities from the actual functionality of the controller.
Yeah, so I think there's an underlying issue there. One of the issues is the fact that we're naming a state object. I mean, realistically, the controller itself is the state object, and the other things that we have on the controller right now are really kind of side effects that should be moved out to a service. But I don't disagree. I think there probably is the need for some sort of common service or factory to provide some handlers. I think wrapping partial set in an abstraction is probably not going to save us all that much, and it's going to add more confusion than it would help. But I think there are other recipes that may be more complex that could be simplified to maybe a single service endpoint. We may need to get a few more concrete examples on there to figure out.
Yeah, I had 2 thoughts on that. 2 thoughts on that were what you were saying, Kai. I think once we have the recipes, maybe we'll see common recipes that'll give us common things that we can make more dry. But the other half of it is like curry, partial, partial right. All these things are generally baked into different libraries now, like Lodash FP or Ramda. And Kai and I were talking about this last night. I kind of wish we were the other way, but right now we are incurring the boilerplate just because we're using Lodash as the utility version and not Lodash as the FP version. Just a thought on that. There are different ways to solve the boilerplate that we're seeing.
Yeah. And as we get more comfortable with all of this, we may even be considering moving over to Ramda instead of Lodash down the line. But we're not there yet. But I certainly think, JT, if we do get a good recipes list together, and some of these look like things we're using in a lot of places, then we also gain the added benefit of being able to quickly document our new, whatever our custom service API layer would be, because in that documentation we can say this is the recipe, and then we can say, you know, use service dot whatever it is. So we can actually start pointing to things. So we can look up, we'd be like, okay, well, we want to do this. This is what the recipe looks like, and this is the utility service that produces the boilerplate.
Yeah, I think there's value in that.
Have a double win there. The one thing I will say while we're on the topic, anytime you're using partial right with your own function that you've created, that's a code smell, because that basically implies that basically the signature in your function is probably wrong. And there's a question also of if you're using partial every time you're using that function, the function should probably just be curried in the first place. That can reduce a lot of that type of boilerplate. If you're finding that you're using partial application on your own functions, and especially if you're using partial right application on your own functions, you probably want to go higher up and reevaluate the signature of the function that you've written. Because you may not need partial application at all. You can just carry the function in the first place, and then change the order of arguments to gain the benefit without having to then rewrap the function. So keep an eye out for that. That's a big win point. And as we get more comfortable with those types of things, I think we'll find that some of that boilerplate will also kind of iron itself out. It's harder when we're dealing with things directly from Lodash, sometimes, right? Because we are using utility.
All right, going to jump over this one for a second, just because this one's pretty low-hanging fruit.
Wait, 1 second. Sorry, I had muted myself because I by accident did. I was going to say to those points that Kai was just talking about, I just pasted 2 links in the One UI room. One's like a primer using JavaScript for functional programming and how you can get there. And then to the order of parameters and stuff like that, there's a good video saying, hey, underscore, you're doing it wrong. I posted that again. I think I've posted it before. But those just might help clarify some of the situations Kai's talking about, if that helps.
Done. I just pinned those in the room as well. Okay, yeah. So get organized here. So yeah, this one's pretty low hanging fruit. So Kai, you just reiterate this one.
Yeah, just trying to do some cleanup in Jira. There's been some confusion around the use of the UI label. The confusion actually goes beyond the folks in this meeting. The confusion has bled out to Mark and Travis at times, and the other UX folks, and then also the way product management uses it. There is a UX label, I think it's a label, and that UX label really means that it needs to be, that there's work that is relevant for like Mark or Travis to do on that story. So to not muddy the water and have a UI version right next to that, we've opted to go with FE for front end as a label, as components are really now reserved for specific components of the application, like Journeys Analytics or touch points or anything like that. So anytime you run across a ticket that has UI being used as either a label or a component, remove them both and replace with a front-end label. There is no front-end component, just a front-end label. Right now, the filters that are being used have and statements in them, but within the next release cycle or so, we'll be removing the UI piece of filtering, and we'll be just looking for that front-end label. Keep in mind that components show up on swim lanes, labels don't. So if you're looking at a bug list, you won't be able to quickly see the fire or FE in the swim lane itself, but that's why we have the quick filters set up. So just use the FE quick filter to see what's relevant. Any questions or concerns around that?
So obviously moving forward, if we see them, change them. But for older ones, have those already been cleaned up, or that's something we should just ongoing?
Yeah, I'll be working through that over the next week or so. If they're closed or resolved, I'm not going to do anything to them. I have no interest in going through 20,000 tickets and updating them all. If they are slated for future release right now, they're not on my radar. But if they're prioritized for release, whether they're PC 14 or PC 15, those should definitely be updated. I've done a handful of them. I'm sure there are plenty more to do. But anybody that runs, I mean, if you're working on a ticket and you can notice that the label and component have UI, replace it with a FE label. If it has UX, only remove it if it really doesn't need Travis or Mark on it. Or otherwise, leave the UX in place because that's really a signifier that it has been through our design team.
Hey Kai, we have in the Vortex team, and I think it was shared with other teams, the subtask generator. This isn't necessarily component, but we use the prefix on the summary, so the description that shows up in the line, to determine what type of subtask it is.
Yep.
Currently, it's keyed off of UI one. If you, it'll be an issue of inconsistency if we don't change that. I don't know if that's something that you're concerned about.
I think the prefixes are normally FE, but if the tool is UI, we probably want to change the tool to use FE. I will say though, Jira has subtask types, and I get it for bugs. For bugs, it might be a little more useful. But I do wonder why all the subtasks need to have those prefixes, because they've got icons that represent the different types, and it just seems redundant.
There's a longer backend.
Sure. If they're using UI, then I think we should probably shift those over to FE, just to be.
So yeah, someone should go through and update that tool and let everyone know that the updated version is out there, where on the subtask generator, they should be using the one that uses FE moving forward when that's updated and published out.
Where does said tool live? Is it in a repository, or is it free flow?
It's on the wiki. I can dig it up.
Cool. Yeah, if you can just ping that to me, I'll take a look later.
So which one do we want to go through next? The plan roadmap or the module loader?
Module loader will actually bleed into the plan roadmap here.
Okay.
So I've been mainly working on this, but Kai's obviously got a vision for it. So basically, we've had a couple of bugs come up from the module loader, mainly around the navigation. And the module loader is setting some things that the navigation needs. And it's just, mutating state synchronously and asynchronously, and it's getting out of whack in a few places. It's been pretty good so far, but as we're starting to do more and more things, we're seeing. So some of the things that we're trying not to dig too deep into the solutions for these different bugs, because we don't want to make too much change, because obviously it is a global solution. So there's two parts to this Trello card, which is if you find a bug that is is determined by the module loader, like the module loader is the cause, and it's not like a breaking issue, like the user just can't do anything else, like they have to refresh the browser. If you could link it to the spike, that would be great. If it's something that is more serious, like you have to do a full page refresh, just sync up with Kai to see about the priority on it, and maybe figure out if there's something small that we can do until we get this looked at. So the other half of this is the actual spike though. And this spike is blocking one bug right now that's just a slight UI regression. So we're gonna try to look at UI router. I guess there's a possible path there from UI to router to use lazy loading, which is what our module loader, solved for us. If we can do that, that's kind of a big win, because now it's a public OSS solution that we can get more support with. And then the other question is, how can we get it to, if it will help us move closer to Angular 2 or not. So if anybody has time to pick that up and, and gets the okay from Kai, then that'd be great. But if not, that's just where it's at. So.
Yeah, I'm going to try to get this prioritized for PC15. We do have a lot of tech debts and whatnot right now targeted for PC15. In a lot of ways, PC15 is going to be a backend release, so everybody's very interested in having some visual changes to the front end. So we do have some opportunities to sort some of these things out and fix some of the UI bugs. But stay tuned on that. I'm going to be hashing it out with Peter and Dara over the next week or so to see what we can get in there. But yeah, that's kind of where we're at. But that does lead us directly. The third question on that ticket was really, what does that mean for non-Angular modules? How does that work? Can it just load a template, for example? Because if it can, problem solved for the most part. And so in some ways, if it can't, then this ticket that Colin has pulled up right now is going to become a blocker, which is a good thing or a bad thing. Data adapters really needs to be overhauled. I didn't realize reports edit is still non-Angular. And I think
the Kendo widget still, or the
right, but is the wrapper itself, is it an Angular module? No, not at all.
it's just the old THM set.
Okay. Yeah, so it may prioritize some of these things. The good news is reports, I think, is going away. At the end of PC15, it's going to be customers will no longer see it. I think it'll still be in the product, feature control. So we may need to work on that, but data adapters is certainly not going anywhere. And visually, it looks and feels like the old application. So that one may actually be a really good target for a PC15 quick win. There's been some talk, though, that if we update data adapters on the front end, the back end folks will want to overhaul the work there. I'm hesitant to couple those two things together because of the stuff that the back end's focused on. So we'll probably just roll ahead with it as a front end change, and obviously when the back end changes, we'll just update our 3 lines of resource code to point to the different back endpoints.
I remember when this was discussed months ago, or maybe years ago at this point. The problem was that they wanted to completely overhaul. Not only if you wanted to move it from a core to an Angular module, they wanted to take a look at the whole UX around it. And if you change the UX, then that's where the back end changes might have been needed. So I don't know where we're pushing this, if we're just going to do a straight, okay, here's what it looks like, here's what it does. We're going to make it do the same thing in Angular. Or they want, okay, well, let's change the tile view to a list view, and let's change the config page to something else, because obviously that's a much larger story.
I muted you guys. But I can't.
Sorry, I didn't see that. The other possibility here is that if this becomes a blocker for the routing, it may be possible to actually just drop the existing non-Angularized module into a very lightweight directive shell and actually have it without having to change any functionality over Angular, but actually make the module itself an Angular module. I mean, at the end of the day, Angular is basically just wrapping JavaScript for us. So I mean, if that's the requirement to get the router moving forward, then I'd be in favor of just doing that, and then we could wait for backend and UX for PC or whatever it's going to be. So that's the plan and roadmap right now. I guess the bottom line is there's no foreseeable or prioritized story for this. Based on the spike for the UI router, we may have some slightly different recommendations in terms of prioritizing this. And I think at the very earliest, we're probably looking at PC16, unless for some reason the router issues become a major blocker for 15. And we have to somehow wrap these. So.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any about 20 minutes? Do we want to keep going, or any particular just random comments you've had over the last week? Or questions?
So I just, since we're all here, with regards to two things. One, let me know how I can help you. I think everybody's been pretty good about that, but please, if I haven't talked to you already, please know that I'm always available for communication, and if you need anything, if priorities are an issue and you're struggling with them, feel free to reach out, and I can fight with Peter and Dara about sorting some of that out. Anything else, any questions or whatnot, feel free anytime. And on the other side, for the list work, it looks like there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and it is more than visible, which is good. So let's keep pushing on that stuff. There was one issue raised this morning about performance in large lists, the main targets being recent changes because of the length of the list, but also the feature of the select all. Pagination was specifically moved out of the story. And so John and I are going to take a look at some performance things this afternoon and see if we can figure out if we can at least get the performance back to where it is in the current releases. And if we can do that, then we'll go ahead and get that into PC14. And we're hopefully having, basically gathering more information to be able to bring to product management so they can figure out prioritization on that side of things. But in terms of the pagination, I don't foresee adding the ability to patch and do some changes for may get bumped up as a special feature for a patches version. But we'll see. I'll let Dara and Peter kind of take the brunt on that one. But hopefully we'll have some more information this afternoon. But I know there was some conversation in the One UI room. I think we were listening around it. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. And if anybody notices any particular bottlenecks that may be slowing lists down at all, bring it up, because right now, I mean, we've cleaned up one tooltip a little bit, which was early bottleneck. I think the other issue right now, we just need to investigate the difference between using track by versus bind once. I think what's basically happening is that we're churning through digest cycles, and each digest cycle is trying to repaint the list as a whole, and we're not getting the benefits of bind once until the last render is done, which is potentially problematic, and obviously would amplify the issue. But we'll have more information on that coming up, and I just want to keep everybody in the loop.
I have one other thing about this. So we're seeing some automation failures, primarily with life cycle stages, where basically what will happen is, so for the loading indicator and the list, the way that we're deciding to hide the loading indicator and display the list is off of the data. Problem is that I think what's happening sometimes is the loading indicator, basically we get data, the loading indicator will hide, but it takes a period of time for the actual list to render itself. So we end up in situations where the buttons haven't necessarily loaded yet within a 16 millisecond time period, and automation is failing because of that, because it doesn't see the buttons, but they end up being there and no customer is ever going to see it.
I'm sure JT has a comment about this, but I'll say it anyway. I mean, first of all, automation shouldn't be waiting for the list to load and then trying to click a button. They should be waiting for the button to be usable and then trying to click the button. So that aside, performance improvements to the list, I mean, it sounds like it's related. It's a painting issue where the list is trying to get painted on the screen, but it's like trying to paint, repaint, and then finally it gets there. And so that's what we'll come up with something like that.
So basically for me, and I'm just gonna update automation in order to just wait until that button is visible, and then that way we're at least, I mean, it's causing smoke failures, so it took me like 4 tries last night to even get a successful smoke before we could run parallel.
Yeah.
Which page is this on again, Chris?
This is on lifecycle stages.
Only on life cycle stages?
Yes, but also understand that lifecycle stages is also the first page with a list on it to ever load with automation.
I say you get the master Colin involved, and maybe you can come up with a better solution.
Well, Master Colin.
Yeah, I'll take a look. We'll take a look after this, but there's probably a simpler solution.
I'm all for it, but I'm just bringing it up because it does relate to the performance stuff.
Yeah,
it definitely does.
It does and it doesn't. It's one of those, like, there are two issues there, and take care of them on both sides.
Yep.
So.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Good luck, guys.
As was already, we're being recorded. Never mind.
Thank you, Justin. We appreciate your failed shots as always.
Also, before we go, happy birthday, Justin.
Thank you, guys.
Birthday.
Congratulations, you made it another year.
I know, right?
Always feels weird when people say happy birthday and then everybody applauds. You're just like, yeah, I lived. Okay.
Yeah.
I did what I'm supposed to do.
You died last year.
Right. I suppose after you're 90, then it might.
Yeah, then you deserve balloons every time.
Cool. I think that's it.
All right. Well, have a good day, everybody. Thanks.
Good lunch. Cheers.
Thanks, guys.
See you later.